Helping us explore the subject of eldest daughter syndrome today is the highly esteemed, and I do mean highly esteemed and accomplished Dr. Michele Leno. And you don't have to take my word for it. Let me just share a little bit about Dr. Leno, and you will see for yourself how accomplished and successful and fantastic she is. Dr. Leno is a native of Detroit and a licensed psychologist in the state of Michigan. She completed her undergraduate studies at Marygrove College and later attended the Michigan School of Professional Psychology, where she obtained her MA in clinical psychology. She completed her doctoral degree at Saybrook University in California. Dr. Leno is the owner of DML Psychological Services, and her company provides therapy and consulting services. She's a member of the American Psychological Association and Psychology Today. Dr. Leno served on the board of directors of the National Association of Women Business Owners. She has offered her expertise to WXYZ Detroit, Insider, New York Post, Cosmopolitan, The National Psychologist, WBRC Fox 6 News, and many other media outlets. She's also the host of the Dr. Michele Show, Mind Matters, which airs on CW50 Detroit. Dr. Leno has several years of experience providing psychological evaluations, therapy, coaching, and consulting services to individuals and organizations. She has worked with clients of all ages and backgrounds, including children, adolescents, adults, athletes, and various professionals. Dr. Leno offers a special intensive therapy and coaching session to busy professionals. Her interests include performance anxiety and the effects of social media on mental health. Dr. Leno helps others get unstuck, transition, and cope with chronic and situational stressors. Don't we all need a little bit of that? Her treatment is based on some guiding principles. First, she maintains that many physical symptoms and somatic complaints stem from poor mental health and coping. Second, others often remain in positions with which they are unhappy due to fears and anxiety about change. She encourages others to recognize their own self-imposed obstacles. Dr. Leno's motto is improve your mental health, improve your life. So as you can see, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Leno as a guest with us today.
Let's talk about Heartside now. Heart gets loud. I know it get hard to be patient. We run away from real conversations.
Good afternoon, Dr. Leno. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you, C?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for making some time to have this conversation. I've been looking forward to talking to you ever since I found your article in Psychology Today, because I am an eldest daughter. And so I think of this episode and this conversation as justice for eldest daughters everywhere, giving some more insights and information about our experience. Yeah, so I really appreciate you being here. And just for folks listening, where do you fall in birth order in your family?
I am actually the eldest daughter. So I can
Okay.
definitely relate to everything that we're talking about today, or most of it, I'll say.
Yeah. Okay. So on my mom's side, I'm the eldest and eldest daughter of 5. And then on my dad's side, I am the second oldest of 6, but still the eldest daughter. And so you're the eldest of how many?
Two.
2. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, cool. And so with this, eldest daughter syndrome becoming more popular on social media and having more conversations about it in our media, is this something or an experience that you were aware of before you kind of got into your career, or has it been more of a newer experience or discovery for you?
I think being the eldest daughter, I was aware of it, but there were no words put to it. So I definitely wasn't considering it as a psychological syndrome. And even getting into my career, there was always more talk about middle child syndrome. Lots more talk about that. And so now eldest daughter is gaining more attention, although I believe that eldest daughters have always felt some type of pressure, but just never defined.
Yes. We didn't have the language, we didn't have the words, but there's something there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners as well, can you define for us what is exactly eldest daughter syndrome? So when we're using that term or when we're using EDS, what do we actually mean by that?
So I'll put a disclaimer on this because we
Mhm.
do get a lot of things from social media and just Google in general. And so syndrome, when we say syndrome, it is not a diagnosis. However, but think of syndrome as sort of getting the ball rolling to maybe a disease or diagnosis. Syndrome is a group of traits that sort of characterize a social, emotional, or physical condition. And so when we think of eldest daughter syndrome, we think of all of the traits that we think of that when we think of that specific condition, and
Mhm.
that makes it a syndrome.
Got it. So those traits or those experiences that come along with being the eldest daughter. So it's not necessarily a mental health diagnosis. It is saying, hey, we recognize that these traits or these experiences tend to be, tend to resonate with this particular group of people.
Absolutely. And we have to be, and the reason we have to be careful with that, because I know that I, along with maybe a lot of other mental health professionals, like sort of we may receive calls where someone will say, well, yeah, I was diagnosed with Eldest Daughter Syndrome. Well, it's not a diagnosis, but it doesn't mean that your experience is not valid. But we want to make sure that people understand it is not a diagnosis or a disease.
Got it. Thank you for that. And what are some of those traits for eldest daughter syndrome in particular that folks may notice or may resonate with that may lead someone to say, "Oh, I think I have that quote unquote have that or that resonates with me. I think I'm experiencing eldest daughter syndrome."
Well, as the eldest daughter, you may feel more pressure. You may feel that you are the one responsible for leading the way. You're the one responsible for getting things done. You may naturally assume that role, or you may feel that it may feel like some external pressure, maybe from your family looking to you to be the responsible one or the one to get the ball rolling for certain things. And so, as the eldest daughter, you may say, well, this is just the role that I fall into. Or you may say, well, I didn't ask for this. But either way, you're receiving something and you're noticing that there's something about your role. Some people feel pressure, some people don't. I think of like the nature versus nurture argument when we think of like, were you socialized to be that way or were you just born that way? And a lot of times I think it's a mix of both, that we're socialized to be a certain way, but we were also born into a certain role.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit more about those distinctions and how they come together with that nature versus nurture? So when you say, well, I guess if we start with nature, that yeah, maybe you were born a certain way. What does that mean, or what does that look like for eldest daughter and eldest daughters in particular? What's the nature aspect of that experience?
Well, you're the first, so you're sort of the one who gets. I don't want to say guinea pig, but you're the one who kind of you get to know the family first. You get to know the expectations of the family first. You get to you things that you're the first to go to school, so you know how all of things work. You know how the world works, and so there is something to that you just like, so you fall into this role without anyone saying, hey, you're the eldest daughter, so you're responsible for, when other children come along, you're responsible for leading the way. So it's sort of like it's just something that clicks. It's just something.
Got it, because you literally are, and I wonder, well, this may come when we talk about kind of the socialization, the nurture piece. Tell me a little bit about that. What you've seen, what you've heard, what that may look like, how we maybe socialize eldest daughters to create or contribute to this experience of eldest daughter syndrome.
And so when we talk about the social piece and people that and so with the social piece, that's where the pressure may come in because the eldest daughter may even be seen as a second parent. You're responsible for where you're the oldest, better, things like that come up. So you are pressured to set examples. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I'm a child too. I didn't ask to be the one to set examples. And your family may look at you as that person okay, well, you're the eldest, so you're going to be the one to show everyone how to do things the right way. You're going to be the first one to, the expectation is, well, you're going to go to college or you're going to get a career and you're going to do these different things. So there's so many expectations for you. And that's that social aspect of it. It's sort of like what you're supposed to do versus maybe even what you want to do. Some eldest daughters may do things that or end up in careers that they were never seeking because there was some pressure associated with those things. And that's the social piece of it. It doesn't mean you don't do well and thrive in life. In fact, you may overachieve because you're trying to do so well, because you
Mhm.
know that you're expected to do well.
A lot of that is resonating with me for sure. Absolutely. The other thing that I think about with that nurture piece or that socialization piece is, so as I mentioned, of my mom's children, I am the oldest and the eldest daughter. Of my dad's children, I am the second oldest, but still the oldest daughter. What do you think, or what do you know about those distinctions or that experience of being the eldest daughter who is not the eldest child, and how that may, what that looks like, that dynamic between maybe, differences and how the oldest son is socialized in a family versus the oldest daughter.
So that right there, like that right there can be another interview in itself because
Right.
as girls, there's more pressure to be more nurturing. There's more pressure to take on, to assume certain roles. So although you may be the eldest daughter, you're not the eldest child, but you have a brother and you may be even expected to take care of your brother when your brother needs help versus your brother will take on the role as being your protector, right? So they have their
Yep.
pressures too. Your brother will have the pressure of, well, you better look after your sister and make sure she's safe, but you still have that pressure of being the responsible one in other aspects, making sure that, if you are of a certain age and you're home together, you may be the one expected to prepare a meal, not your brother, right?
Yep.
You may be the one expected to do, all sorts of things, inform mom and dad of, things when they get home, how did
Mhm.
the day go? So you're expected to take on those roles. So in that sense, you may even feel like, although your brother is calling you little sis, you may feel like big sis because it's like, well, hey, I had to take care of you too, because I had to make sure, you were fed today. I had to make
Yeah.
sure everybody got their homework done. So those things are so even in that situation, you may still feel like the eldest, but you just know that your brother's there to defend you physically, right?
Yeah, that that is essentially my childhood in a nutshell. Like, absolutely. My older brother and even my younger brothers are very protective, and my brother, I have a brother who's about 4 years younger than me, and he's been taller than me since he was like 10. And he is very protective, but with all of my siblings, I have always been the responsible one, the one who
Yeah.
takes care of things, who gets things done. Yes, you're absolutely right. When our parents were away, were, out working or running errands, it was Sierra's in charge. Yep, folks were
Uh-huh.
eating, we're getting homework done, we're taking baths, all of those sorts of things. I was the one kind of accountable for those things. And I even remember my mom, she would take me with her when she went to go pay bills or run errands. And she would say, because you need to know how to do these things. Like, you need to
Yeah.
know how to run a household and how to manage a household. I don't know that my brothers ever had that same experience of,
Mhm.
here are some things you need to know about how to manage a household and preparing meals and those sorts of things. And so, yeah, I do think that that's where some of that pressure comes from, because the way
Absolutely.
that we're socialized as girls and women, the responsibilities being a little different.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so
Yeah.
when you're and it can be seen as unfair that
Mhm.
you are socialized to be the parent when the parents are away, and you're thinking, well, he's older. Why am I the one that has this responsibility? But people see us as falling into those roles more naturally. It's easier to condition us or train us to be this way
Yeah.
than it is to train your brother to be that.
Yeah, yeah, and then it just kind of becomes a cycle because then I am the one who is kind of more naturally thinking of these things of like, oh yeah, I know before my mom comes home from work, like during the summer, she's gonna expect the house to be clean. So I'm the one getting up in the morning and making
Mhm.
sure, like, I'm assigning chores. I'll clean the kitchen, you clean the bathroom, and those sorts of things. And then it becomes, well, yeah, you're the one who does that because you're good at it. It's like,
Yes.
well, yes, I am good at it because I wasn't really given. I, I became good at it.
Mhm. And it's like, yeah, I'm good at it because I had no choice but to be good at it. And so,
Mhm.
and then you don't know anything else. And then it becomes, and when you talk about the cycle, you may even socialize your own children to be that way. So do we change the dynamic or does it work for us?
That's so interesting because I think about that and I wonder about that because my mom is also the oldest and eldest daughter. And so I wonder how her having a daughter first kind of influenced her expectations or, those sorts of things. Like, yeah, and that is something that I think about
Mhm.
as someone who desires to grow my family and to have children. How I'll handle that if I have a daughter first or just having an eldest daughter. Yeah, what do we do about that cycle? And that makes me think too of, are there cultural differences that exist in this experience of how we socialize eldest daughters, whether that's across race or across class, geographically? Are you aware of any cultural similarities or differences?
I am aware of more similarities than
Mhm,
differences. So when we think of cultural differences, I would say that this here makes us very similar.
mhm.
This brings us together because I think you can talk to someone who doesn't even speak your language, but you'll find some way to connect on this topic. So there are more similarities than differences. And I think that's why there's such a strong nature nurture component. I even look at I look at I have two nephews and a niece. So my niece is one and she'll be two in April of 2025. But and so I have a niece, I have a nephew who's 5, and then my oldest nephew is 14. He's going to be 15 soon. But I look
Mm.
at how my niece, when she's playing with all the kids and there are a lot of boys, she will I'll see her like clean up something or give somebody a hug when they're crying or do things like that.
Mhm.
And it's like just is like, wow, okay. Is it because she's the girl and she's around all these boys and nobody has like trained her to do anything? Nobody's telling her that she has to do these things as a girl, but it's
Right.
sort of like it's natural for her to do these things.
Even as the youngest.
Even as much, much younger. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see her role as she's coming along, as they grow in age. Yeah.
That is interesting. That is so interesting. Yeah, and even thinking about like, yeah, those age gaps and thinking about how that impacts things in terms of being the eldest daughter. I know for me, my older brother is about 2 years older than me. And then my brother that's after me, that comes next after me, we're about 4 years apart. I also have two sisters we are 14 and 18 years apart.
Mhm.
And still my role, my dynamic is the same with each of them,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I even yeah, do you know how age gaps or yeah, the amount of time between siblings kind of impacts that eldest daughter experience?
Age gaps can make a huge difference. So of course, like my sister and I, we are 11 years apart. So I think in some ways we both have some eldest daughter traits. And another factor that plays in is when in close families where there are cousins. And so,
Mhm.
you take on, so my sister, though we're 11 years apart, she's the younger sister. She has some of the similar traits of an eldest daughter, and she may take on some of the traits as an eldest sibling with my cousins that are
Yeah.
several years younger. And so, yes, age gaps really do play a role. Now, when we're thinking of siblings that are really, really close in age, that oldest sibling, even if they're months apart, even if they're not that full 1 year apart, may still be responsible for, that sort of, better. You're the one.
Right.
And they're like, wait a minute, we're not even that far apart. And they may still take on role. And so age gaps do play a role, if you notice. Age gaps larger families, definitely, as you said, like as in your family.
Mhm.
Yeah, all of those factor in, and it makes it a little harder to stereotype. Yes.
Got it. Okay, yeah, because it can shift the dynamic some.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Absolutely. Yes.
y and you bring up a good point too about how it's not only the eldest daughter always that can take on some of those traits, because I do think about my youngest sister. She is 12, and the sister above her is 16, and there are some times where I see my youngest sister, uh, taking on some of the like, she's my twin, essentially, it feels like
Okay.
she is me again,
Yeah.
and she takes on a lot of that responsibility. She will just randomly get bored and start cleaning and organizing things, and, she has been known to wake her older sister, like, my 16-year-old sister, up for school or other activities that they have going on. Can you speak to that a little bit of how the eldest daughter syndrome or those experiences aren't always limited to the eldest daughter? Other folks in the family can kind of take on some of those traits.
Right. And so that can have a lot to do with how many siblings there are in the family, the type of family you're in. And so that's where we must look at not just, okay, eldest daughter syndrome. We have to look at some other factors, right? Because sometimes we can get stuck on this syndrome and it is this way, but we must look at what do we see happening here? And as you've made some observations yourself, you say you're practically twins because you see her doing a lot of the same things that you do. So that's good that you're looking at that, because if we were only focused on, well, I'm the eldest daughter, she's younger, she's this way, I'm another way, we would miss those unique traits of that person. And so when that happens, that's dangerous because that's when we don't see the person. We see birth order, right? And
Right.
birth order is just that. It's just birth order. It's the order in which you were born in a family. It does not have to define you, that
Yes.
birth order. Oftentimes, and so if you have a middle child, you look at that middle child to be more dependent and attention
Mhm.
seeking and not knowing their role and the family. But what if that's not true? What if that's not unique to them? What if they are exhibiting some traits of an eldest sibling or, a last born? Whatever you would miss it if you're only focused on stereotypes. And so we have to make sure we're not so focused on placing people in boxes that we're missing the actual person.
That is such a great point, and that goes back to that nurture and socialization piece. Have we developed some of these traits because we put folks in the box? We've treated you as the stereotypical middle child, and so now you were, demonstrating some of those traits. We treated
Mhm.
you as you are the one who has to be the example and have all the responsibility, and so now some of that becomes internalized, and now we're experiencing more eldest daughter syndrome. That is a great point. Like, there's more nuance to it when we're focusing on the individual and not just the orders that they were born in.
Absolutely. And when you think of, if you believe in self-fulfilling prophecies, that ties into
Mhm.
that. Sometimes you look for something for so long, or you've been told that you're something for so long, you become that. And it's like you don't have to become that. Think of who you actually are. And in terms of, the parenting style comes into place when you talk
Mhm.
about nuances. You've mentioned the age gap. So we look at all of these other factors. It's not solely birth order that we're looking at. However, if you are feeling some of the pressure based on your birth order, something like eldest daughter syndrome sort of validates your feelings. And so that's the
Right.
good of something like this. It lets you know you're not alone. You're not alone because so many people are saying, "Hey, I identify with C. I get it. You're preaching to the choir here."
Mhm. Yeah, just to have a name to put on something, or to say like I'm not imagining this, I'm not making it up. Like this is a real, like you said, it's maybe not it's not a diagnosis, it's not a disease, it's not a disorder, but it is a very real and valid experience.
It is, it is. And someone listening to this may say, well, no, that wasn't the case in my family because my eldest sibling, maybe had some other issues like substance
Mhm.
abuse that stopped them from taking on that role. So it is true. I mean, and your experience is valid also. And that's what I mean by not placing people in the box, because
Right.
there are people, you may be the middle or you may be the last born, and you certainly identify with some of the symptoms that we're talking about of the eldest born.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thinking about seeing some of that validation or experiencing some of that validation, for me, I think the first place that came from before, we were talking about eldest daughter syndrome on social media and online, was in media, seeing experiences of other eldest daughters and their families on in TV and movies. Was like, oh, I resonate with that. Like I resonate with that experience. One that it definitely hits different watching the movie Soul Food as an adult than it did as a child, because
Yeah,
I resonate with Terry so much in the sense of she's the oldest and she has all this responsibility, and people continue to add to that responsibility without really checking in to say, can you handle this? Is this okay? Actually, how are you doing? Do you need anything?
absolutely. And it's so funny you bring up soul food because soul food started, I paid more attention to it when I started to watch the series when the series came out. And I thought, wow, it's almost like they consulted with a psychologist. I don't know if they did or not,
Mm,
to say, okay, the person who's the eldest, you're going to take on this role. The middle, you're going to take on this role. The youngest, you're going to take on this role. Because there was always so much focus, the movie and the series, on that firstborn and lastborn. And I mean, they played their roles so perfectly. And the middle child, I mean, played that role to a T. And when I say they played their roles perfectly, I'm speaking to how we define it, how we stereotype it, and what we expect. It's like they met all of the expectations. You had, I think you said it was Terry, who was the
mm,
oldest.
mhm,
She's the firstborn, and she, true to form, she was the highest income earner.
mhm.
And she was the first to have so many experiences. She was the first, I believe, first to divorce, first, and all of those things. So she really did set the tone for what people were supposed to do. And so
Right.
yeah. So I do think that is, if you're looking to figure out, well, what is this syndrome and what are these different roles, take a look at that movie.
Yes, absolutely. It's and then when Encanto came out a few years ago, my brother actually, one of the songs from Luisa, who was the oldest daughter in Encanto, my brother sent me that song. He's like, "This reminds me of you so much." And the whole song is about, "I'm fine, I'm strong, I got it, but what if I'm not? And is that okay? But I have to be because that's what everybody wants and expects from me. And it's fine, everything's fine." He's like, "Oh, this reminds me of you so much." And I'm just like, "Oh, does it?"
Mhm, mhm. And it's like, do you always want, and so what siblings should know is the eldest, I think we do like our roles because it's what we know, right? It's
Yep.
kind of what we know, it's the familiar, but we're not always as strong as you may think. We're not,
Right.
we feel our feelings and we want to be allowed to feel our feelings, but we can be there for you at the same time. But just know that life may not be as easy as the eldest daughter makes it seem.
Yes. I saw a post on social media not too long ago that said, "Remember that your big sister doesn't have a big sister."
Mhm.
It's like, yes, like and you're absolutely right. It's one of the greatest joys in my life to be a big sister. Like I love it. I take it very seriously. Like I'm all in. I love it. And it absolutely comes with some stress and some pressure that isn't always visible, and it doesn't always get talked about. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I don't always speak up about my experience being the eldest daughter and the challenges that can come along with that sometimes, because I don't want to put that on them, and I don't want them to feel bad. And I do love being their big sister. I love that they see me as a source of support and that they can come to me if they need things or just need to vent or, and that they know that I'm on their side. And what does that also teach them? That I don't have needs or I don't need things, and I am just here available without any needs of my own.
Yeah, and you know what? You took the words right out of my mouth because I was going to say some of that and some of that perception of us can be attributed to how we behave and our, I guess, lack of asking for help, right? And letting it
Yeah.
be known that we need that because we're so used to, I got this, I'll figure it out. You don't need to worry about me. I'm here to worry about you, or I'm here to help you. So, so yeah, we definitely have to own some of if people aren't checking in
Absolutely.
with us, that may be why, because it doesn't appear that we need that.
Yeah, we've unintentionally maybe taught them that we don't need that, and we're good, we're fine, everything's fine, even when it's absolutely not.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. So important to know.
yeah. What are your thoughts on how siblings can support their eldest daughter sibling, their eldest sister, and be there for them and recognize you know uh, the value and the contributions that the eldest daughter makes to the family? How can they be helpful or supportive and understanding younger siblings?
I think just that awareness through conversations like this, because again, it may come as a shock to people that the eldest daughter needs that. So just first starting with understanding that, your big sister may not always be as strong as you think she is, but she's there to support you. And then just taking on the role, offering to do some things that your big sister may be responsible for doing. Just maybe taking some things off of her plate and saying, "Hey, I got this." No, I got you. You may get some, "Oh, no, I got it. I'm fine." But don't stop
Hmm.
asking. So this time around, she may say, I don't need help with this. I'm fine. Just go about doing what you need to do. But don't stop asking. Continue asking. But I think just knowing that you're aware makes a difference because sometimes the eldest daughter can feel taken for granted. And, I will say I do have a lot of support in my family. So I don't necessarily feel taken for granted, but I do think I am seen as somebody who's strong and together. But in some families, you may feel taken for granted. You may feel people lean on you and you never receive that thank you or
Yeah.
understanding because you're doing what you're supposed to do. So just having those family members say, "Hey, I get it," or "Thank you. Thank you for doing this." Because sometimes when you feel entitled to something, you forget to say thank you.
Yes, that is such a great point. A thank you goes a long way, and a long way of recognizing I am not your responsibility as
Mhm.
your younger sibling, and I'm so grateful and appreciative of the ways you show up and support and encourage and provide or whatever the case might be. Yeah, a thank you, an acknowledgement. I love that you said don't stop asking
Mhm.
because you're right. We as eldest daughters, we can have the tendencies like I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me.
Mhm.
Uh, don't stop asking. We do
Don't stop
need
asking.
that nudge sometimes of like let me do this for you. Let me buy you dinner every once in
Mhm.
a while or, show up for you in this way. And it does go a long way. It is incredibly, incredibly helpful. What about for parents who are maybe aware or becoming more aware of the experience of eldest daughter syndrome and want to help manage that within their own families, maybe want to find that balance between teaching responsibility without teaching their eldest daughter, to take on too much responsibility. What are some recommendations you might have for parents who want to kind of be aware or manage this dynamic within their families?
Well, first, try to see your child. Try to see your child for who they are versus where they fall in birth order. That makes a big difference. Let's get rid of the "you're supposed to be this way" and see them for who they actually are. that'll take you very far, and that will improve a relationship. Even if you have the best relationship, that will improve it even more. And look at your children as, I know it's hard for parents to treat their children equally. I'm not a parent, so I'm not telling you how to parent, but try to treat your children, try to teach everybody responsibility. Considering you're a family with multiple children, try to teach responsibility rather than placing emphasis on the eldest daughter. Well, you need to do this because you're the oldest. You need to take care of the finances. You need to go to school. You need to do these things. You need to be the one preparing meals. You need to do all of these things. Try to make sure all of your children are aware of some of the necessities in life. And then notice what's important to them. Notice if the eldest doesn't want to maybe carry on a trend in the family. Maybe you're born into a family of doctors, or you're born into a family of teachers, and the eldest daughter attempts to break that cycle. Let them do that. Have a conversation around. Don't say, well, sometimes families may say something like, well, if your sisters or your siblings see you doing this, then they're going to get off track too. Who's to say that they're off track because they want to do something different? So just acknowledging individual differences will have great impact, and it'll make your child feel seen as a person rather than a stereotype or a set of symptoms or a syndrome.
Right. Yes. That is so incredibly powerful. And I think, finding that balance between teaching responsibility and still allowing your child to be a child. Like, yes, they are the oldest child or the oldest daughter, and they are still a child. They are still learning and growing just as your other children are. And I wonder if there's if part of how we, get to the experience of eldest daughter syndrome is because there is so much pressure on parents too, especially with the first child. It's like to do it right, so to speak. And so they're figuring it out too. It's like, especially if you're the eldest daughter is also the eldest child, you've never done this before.
Yeah, you've never done this before. And so your parenting style may be to place a lot of pressure on them. You may be a very authoritarian parent, whereas we know that authoritative parents tend to, for most families, is the best parenting style. Authoritative parenting is more of, I'm the authority, but I'm going to guide you rather than punish you. And, for not doing things my way, and I'm going to see you for who you are. And so, yeah, all of that plays a role. So we do need to see our children for who they are versus who we expect them to be. Sometimes what happens is in some families, when that eldest child doesn't meet those conditions, they may get compared a lot to the younger siblings, or maybe doing better than them financially, socially. And so that's not fair. It's not fair to them. And so we want to consider that too. So think about how you talk about your kids, how you think about them. And it starts with really how you got to start with how you think about them, because how you think about them will affect how you talk about them. So if you're thinking, oh my God, you're just not who I expect you to be, being first child, and your siblings came along and they're outdoing you, is that healthy? Like, if you're thinking about them that way, that's going to influence how you speak about them. And it's going to influence your relationship with them. So if you're noticing a distant relationship and you're not happy with that distant relationship, start with thinking about how you feel about your eldest child.
And, I could see that going both ways of, comparing the eldest child to siblings that have come after them. It's like, wow, like, you're not setting the example that I thought you would or expected you to. And I could see it happening in the reverse of the younger siblings being compared to that eldest sibling or that eldest daughter of, she's done this and she's accomplished that. Why can't you just be more like her? Why don't you do this, do these things? And it's so interesting. I think about even the dynamic between my brother and I. My brother is one of the smartest people I know, and he's also incredibly creative. And for him, he needs all the room and space to create. That is when he is in his zone and in his element. I am a creative that also likes to play it safe.
Okay.
You know, the structure of school and higher education, all of that works very well for me and my brain. And for
Yeah.
my brother, he's like, half that stuff don't matter or make any sense, and I don't need it to do what I want to do. Not because he can't, but because it's not the best use of his talents and his passions and his interests. And I think it's really amazing the ways that I've been able to watch my mom figure out how to support and encourage us both in our own individual lanes. And I think it's been a process for her to recognize that, yes, I followed this particular path and he is fully capable of following that particular path and may not because it's not the right path for him.
Yeah, and that's so interesting that you explained it that way because you said that you play it safe, and girls are often socialized and taught to play it safe, whereas
Mhm.
boys are like the sky's the limit, even when it comes to investments. Males are considered to make more extreme investments, whereas females are more likely to, well, no, I don't want to spend all the money. I don't want to break the
Mhm.
bank. And so, yes, what you just described is like that. That is very, very much so what happens. And so you're doing what you're expected to do. Like you need your space and you play it safe. And that's the
Mhm.
expectation of girls versus boys.
Yeah, it makes all the sense because in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, I have all these ideas and these passions, and I want to take these risks. And I absolutely was socialized to prioritize stability and security and even some predictability. And so it can only go so far in that direction.
Mhm.
Whereas my brother is like, I'll try it. If it works out, great. If it don't, oh well.
Yeah. I think we first learned to color within the lines.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the boys can like make the whole page their art.
Yes. And that's
Their work of
fine.
art.
Yes, that's so interesting. That is so interesting. And like I was saying, I first kind of saw myself represented in the experiences that I was seeing in media and in television. But things are changing and looking a little differently. And so a lot of people are maybe discovering the language of eldest daughter syndrome from social media. Maybe they're on TikTok and they see a video and it, sends them to another video. What are your thoughts on the fact that this has become, so much of a buzzword or a hot topic, so to speak, on social media? Are there benefits to that? Are there risk or downsides to that?
Well, we know that, yes to all of that. And here, risk and benefits. And so the good thing is that on the upside, social media gets the conversation going, and it can be a place of agreeing or disagreeing. It can validate what you're experiencing. It can make you feel heard and seen. Like finally, somebody gets it. And then, so the downside is where it's like, well, no, I don't. That's not me. I don't relate to that at all. And this doesn't, and so sometimes, and that's fine if you don't relate to it, but just know that it may be somebody else's experience. But sometimes what happens with social media, sometimes we can internalize experiences. And so
Mm,
always know, use social media responsibly. And if you identify with something, great. If you don't identify it with it, great. But don't try to internalize something that's not your experience. Because sometimes what happens is we may do that with social media. We want so strongly to identify with something that we start seeing, oh yeah, I feel pressure doing this and something's wrong. This is why I feel anxious, or this is why I feel depressed. So we're looking for answers, but sometimes we're looking for answers in the wrong place, and that may not be why. So make sure you're using it responsibly. And if you identify with it, great. But don't get to the point where you over identify with something that may not be the basis for another experience that
that's
but
so
it's
good.
nice that it
Yeah.
gets the ball rolling and it gets us talking about
Mm,
these things. But don't use
absolutely.
it to self-diagnose.
Right, right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Resonate, let it validate your experience. And something that you've said multiple times in different ways throughout our conversation is you don't have to be boxed in to this particular experience. You are a person
Yes.
that is more than the order in which you were born. And that is something that is absolutely like a sticking with me, and I think going to continue to resonate with me, and I'm sure with our listeners as well, that we don't have to limit ourselves and limit our experience to I'm the oldest, I'm the middle child, I'm the youngest. This is what's expected of me. This is my role in the family. This is my role in life. To accept that nuance about ourselves and about others. It's making me think like, have I boxed my siblings in to their particular birth order, and making me think about wanting to be more intentional about making sure I'm getting to know them
Mhm.
as who they are and not who I think they are or think they will be as my younger sister or younger brother. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, yes. It's so important. It's so important. And it's important to know that just because people see you a certain way doesn't mean you have to live up to that perception. And when we think of the reason why we stereotype and place people into boxes is because it makes us feel more comfortable. We want to know what we're dealing with. It makes us feel more in control when we interact person, but we can say, well, yeah, I know that she likes this, or she's going to do this or that. So when I'm interacting with her, this is what I can expect from her. But it doesn't mean that you need to live up to. It doesn't mean that, someone may say, okay, well, you're the type who's not going to speak up about something, or you don't care about this topic. But you may get there and you're talking all over the place. You have like several talking points about that topic. So just because you're boxed in based on this group of people doesn't mean you have to stay in the box. You can come out of that box and say, hey, well, no, no, I do have something to say. And,
Absolutely.
so really you're not responsible for meeting expectations. Take that pressure off of yourself. People can keep their boxes, but you're not responsible for staying in it.
Ooh, that's so good. Yes, they can keep their boxes, but you are not responsible for staying in it. I love that. Yes, thank you. Is anything else you would like to share or any takeaways that if if our listeners get nothing else from this episode, if they get nothing else from all of the gems that you have shared, is there any key takeaways that you want them to leave this conversation with?
Feel comfortable being who you are as an individual. You have a personality. You're not limited to a stereotype. You're not limited to a syndrome. Be who you are, and people will accept that. And use social media responsibly.
Yes. Definitely necessary. Yes. One of the things I like to do towards the end of episodes is give folks like a personal practice, kind of like therapy homework, of ways that they can apply this conversation to their everyday life. Is there anything you would recommend, whether it's for the eldest daughters or for their siblings, as a way to kind of take this conversation and make it their own and apply it to their life?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a fan of increasing self awareness. And so sometimes we are not aware of who we are. We just kind of go about life and, sort of an autopilot, right? And so to increase your awareness, if I have to give you some homework, whether it's meditation, 5 minutes of meditation, you can even be broken up, but you have time. So don't say you don't have time, some meditation or just journaling, quick notes about who you are. But start your day with something that raises your self awareness, whether it's through meditation, journaling, post-its with positive affirmations, but start your day focused on you every day,
Ooh,
even if it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, but just do something every day that starts with you before you leave your house or before you start work or before you talk to the first person you need to talk to every day.
I love that. Start your day with you.
Mhm.
I love that. Thank you so much. Dr. Leno, I know folks are going to be wondering how they can connect with you, where they can find you, how they can learn more about you and the work that you're doing and all the things that you have going on. Where can folks find you or connect with you?
So I am on social media. You can follow me on Instagram. You can also just Google and it'll all pop up. I am Michele with one L, Michele, last name Leno, Leno. So if you Google Dr. Michele or Dr. Michele Leno, you'll find me. It'll also link you to my social media. And for those of you who are local, I am in Michigan. I have a TV show, the Dr. Michele Show, Mind Matters, which airs every Saturday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on CW50.
Great. And I will put all of those links in the show notes as well to make it easier for folks to be able to click and find you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Dr. Leno. This was an incredible conversation for me. It was healing and restorative for me as an eldest daughter, and I'm sure for many of our listeners as well. Thank you again. There are so many other topics and so many other directions we could have went in this conversation, which just means you'll have to come back.
Yes. Thank you for having me, and I'll be more than happy to come back.
Great. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Leno. Thank you for tuning in to From the Heartside Out, hosted by See the Sex Lady, produced by Christine Johnson of Pure Pod Vibes, and music by Rico the Artist. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform of choice. And don't forget to share with a friend so they can learn something too. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Please send any comments or questions to podcast@seethesexlady.com. That's podcast@seethesexlady.com. Until next time, keep loving, living, and leading from the heart side out.